There are certain texts, words, phrases that connect so deeply with a memory that anytime we come across them, no matter what the context, they transport us back to particular moments or seasons in our lives. For some, it may be a poem, a song, a quote from a favorite book. The best examples that we have from Jewish tradition would be, for example, the Kaddish, with its rhythmic cadence that brings those who mourn closer to one another, to generations past, and to that epicenter of grief within. But there are others that we have in Jewish tradition. The words of Psalm 23, perhaps, "The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want." Special readings from prayer books like one that sticks out for me, "Grant us peace, your most perfect gift." Or perhaps, "Let us adore the ever-living God." And even prayers closer to home, like Rabbi Danziger's prayer for the sick here at Temple Israel. We can all think of words, quotes like this, Jewish or otherwise, that evoke deep emotional nostalgia within our hearts. Words that inspire and comfort, brighten and darken, keep us together, or break us wide open. Just a few days ago, we entered into the month of Elul, which means that we are now beginning to prepare for the High Holy Days, which I'm sure you may be surprised to hear occur in just under a month or so. Now, the High Holy Days are a unique time when memory and emotion weave together to nourish our spiritual selves on the cusp of this new year. And as many of us may be familiar, with Elul comes a very particular text, Psalm 27. Now, admittedly, it is not as well known as these other texts I've mentioned, nor does it often carry the same emotional resonance for most of us. Even the tradition of reciting it over 100 times traditionally between now and the end of Sukkot is relatively new in the scope of Jewish history. It's only about 270 years old. But looking at the text itself, we find words that speak not only to this season, but to this particular moment, as the Jewish world mourns the news of this past week. Psalm 27 begins confidently. "God is my light and my rescue, whom should I fear? God is my life's stronghold, of whom should I be afraid?" It affirms God's ability to shield and provide for us, granting us courage and confidence to meet life's difficulties. The psalm envisions this protection in physical space, whether it be the ancient temple or any place, whether physically or metaphorically, where we feel safe. It says, "One thing do I ask of God, that I may dwell in God's house all the days of my life, to behold God's sweetness and to gaze upon God's palace." These, likely the most famous words of Psalm 27, describe a place of comfort, of safety, of confidence in our connection with God and God's care for us. But in just a few verses, the tone of the psalm shifts dramatically. It changes to actually calling out for God's presence, praying that, quote, "God's face is not turned away from us, that we are not abandoned." The confidence of the first section seems to have been shaken. Once near, God's presence is now seen as far away. And finally, the last segment of the psalm does not return to that same confidence, but it instead ends on a note of hope. Quote, "If I but trust to see God's goodness in the land of the living, hope for God. Let your heart be firm and bold, and hope for God." So the psalm seems to take us on a journey from confidence to doubt to hope. Kind of a strange and unexpected journey, but realistically a very human one, and also a very Jewish one. As Dr. Benjamin Sommer writes, hope rather than perfect confidence characterizes the most mature Jewish faith. A readiness to admit one's fears, to look toward God expectantly while renouncing the claim to predict all of God's actions. In other words, we turn to our faith, our trust in the Creator in difficult times, not because we are assured of the outcome if we do, but because the one thing we need most in those times is hope. And by reaching out beyond ourselves, by affirming our connection to something, someone, somewhere that we know cares for our well-being, we can find hope for a better future. I think it's safe to say that this past week has been one of the hardest for our people in the 48 weeks or so since October 7th of last year. In a year when it has been hard to hope, many feel like the last shreds of hope that they still had were ripped away with the loss of the 6 hostages held in Gaza. And though the loss of all of these precious souls is an unfathomable tragedy for so many of us, the loss of one soul, Hirsch Goldberg, Poland, was a wound to our hearts so grave, so brutal, that it is hard to find words to describe it. So as I myself struggled to find the words, I looked to the words of Hirsch's mother, Rachel Goldberg, Poland, in her eulogy. And I looked also to the words of this season in Jewish time, the words of Psalm 27. And I was struck by a resonance between the two. In her eulogy, Rachel wrote, "Part of what is so deeply crushing and confusing for us is that a strange thing happened along this macabre path upon which our family found itself traveling for the past 332 days. Amidst the inexplicable agony, terror, anguish, desperation, and fear, we became absolutely certain that Hirsch was coming home to us alive. But it was not to be." Here I heard echoed the words of the psalm, "God is my life's stronghold. Of whom should I be afraid? Though a camp is marshaled against me, my heart shall not fear." Remembering her son, Rachel said, "As we transform our hope into grief and this new unknown brand of pain, I beg of you, please do what you can to have your light shine down on me, Dada, Levy, and Orly. Help us to rise again. You will always be with us as a force of love and vitality. You will become our superpower." She was talking to Hirsch, and yet here again I hear the poetry of the psalmist. God is my light and my rescue, if I but trust to see God's goodness in the land of the living. In Rachel's words, I will love you and I will miss you every single day for the rest of my life, but you are right here. I just have to teach myself to feel you in a new way. In the words of Psalm 27, one thing do I ask of God, that I dwell in the house of the eternal all the days of my life. Few of us can imagine the depth of this family's grief, but I think we all in some way share in their journey from confidence in Hirsch's return, hope in a positive outcome after all this tragedy, to unimaginable grief. After clinging to confidence, we find ourselves in the depths of doubt, whether our prayers are heard, whether any of those trapped beneath the earth for nearly a year will ever see the sunlight again, whether their lives are of enough political value that they will get to see their families again. In so many ways, we walk a similar path to the speaker in Psalm 27, once bolstered in confidence, but left doubting in the face of tragedy and hardship. But the psalm does not end there, and our journey must not end here in this realm of doubt. Instead, it must march forward with hope as its banner. It is exactly in this moment when we look beyond ourselves, to each other, to our Jewish family, our community, our allies, because by reaching out, we will see that we are not abandoned. That while we may feel far from God's presence and God's mercy, we are not alone. And though darkness may swirl around us, there is always light, always hope to be found. And so we continue to pray, to hope, to sing, to shout, to walk, to live, finding in our hearts a piece of the strength and courage that allowed Hirsch, Ori, Eden, Almog, Alexander, and Carmel to survive 329 days in captivity, never abandoning hope that one day those still held captive, and perhaps even all of us, can dwell in that place of safety and security, that place of sanctuary in the house of God, that we will all live to see God's sweetness in the land of the living all the days of our lives. Ken Yehi Ratzon, may it be God's will. We say together, Amen.
Amen.